Hi, you are listening to Baachu Talk, a podcast for government services professionals. My name is Bhaskar, and I will be sitting down with our government services leaders to share their stories, discuss their career, and learn all about their values and collective impact in our society. Today's guest is Paul Bean. Paul is a highly caliber executive with a proven strategic and operational track record, kickstarting his career in hotel operations with Hilton and Marriott Hotels. In 2006, Paul was awarded fellowship by the UK Institute of Hospitality in recognition of his contribution to the UK hospitality sector. Paul has spent the last 17 years in large-scale facilities management, contract management, and business development, operating in many sectors in Europe. In November 2019, Paul was recognized for his contribution to the facilities management sector with a fellowship award from IWFM. Paul was co-founder of Resource Group, which was started from management buy-in and was built to integrate 5 companies, created one of the largest private FM companies in Ireland from 2006 to 2010. Following his exit in 2010, Paul held executive-level positions with GDF Suez and Amey PLC up until 2014, when he joined Sodexo, where Paul held the position of Chief Exec Mining Worldwide. Paul has a track record of success in securing and mobilizing large-scale, complex, integrated FM contracts, and was instrumental in driving the growth and innovation for mining within Sodexo, and helped to drive business growth significantly over 6 years, establishing a market-leading position in many territories globally, including leading the award and mobilization of the largest contract awarded to Serco in its 52-year history, valued at $3 billion. Joining City FM in March 2020 as chief exec, Paul brings with him a wealth of expertise in business growth, people management, change management, project management, innovation, and problem solving. Welcome to Baachu Talk, Paul. Great to have you with us.
Great to be here this morning with you. Thank you, Basha.
Thank you, Paul. So, Paul, let's go back to the very beginning, Paul, just to get a feel for where you were born and your high school and education.
Yeah, so I was born in Liverpool, and some people probably detect the very slight twang. I've lived away from Liverpool since I was 17, so my accent softened over the years. I went to school in a fairly standard comprehensive in Kirby near Liverpool, and I then went to further education college in Cassio in Watford, which is all a story in itself. I ended up going to Watford, and I left school or college post A levels, so I never went on to university. I took the University of Life route.
Oh wow, Paul, that's amazing. I think from Watford, Paul, from higher education, and how did you move into the career, Paul? What was your first job?
Well, ironically, my first job was as a delivery driver for home shopping, which back then, when I think about it, it's quite extraordinary when you think about how big home shopping is today.
Yes. Wow.
So I was sort of 17 years old, passed my driving test, and the first job opportunity that came along was driving. So I did that only for a year, and then I moved into a marketing role with a company called Ladbroke Hotels back then. So the Ladbroke Group, as you would know it today, the betting company.
Yes.
Back in the early 80s, owned hotels, and I joined the promotions and marketing team, designing and developing food and beverage events. And that role took me all over Europe, actually, because we were largely doing launches for products in hotels. So anything from launching a new Saab to launching, home products that was quite popular then to hire a room in a hotel and sell home products. So yeah, pretty diverse introduction to hospitality.
Wow. Was hospitality the sector that you spent the early part of your career, Paul?
Yeah, I really fell into hospitality because I think leaving college I wasn't clear what I wanted to do, but
Mm,
I was very creative. Um, I always had something happening, whether it was artistically, musically,
mm,
um, and I enjoyed the sort of freedom of creation. So getting into marketing promotions really allowed me to sort of flex that and you know do things like design campaigns, design rooms, and that was my introduction to hotels. So I wasn't really on the service side in the first year or so. Um, and After a year, the only way I can describe it is I was plucked from marketing by one of the operations directors for Ladbroke Hotels and guided. I mean, I was pretty much told you would be a good operator. Quite why, I don't know. Maybe it was something to do with my work ethic because I tended to work very long hours. Um, and yeah, I was thrust into a hotel. I think I was 21, 22 years old, and I didn't know how to fry an egg, let alone operate a business like that. So I had to learn everything from the ground up, and I did over 4 years perform just about every activity in the hotel. Um, so it was a good grounding. I have to admit, after 4 years of hotel keeping, I still wasn't convinced hotels was for me, but
yes.
I'd fallen into an environment that I enjoyed, and it seemed to look after me, and so I continued along that line for almost 20 years.
Wow. So the first hotel that you were part of, does it still exist, Paul? Do you visit?
Yeah, the actual buildings there, it's no longer a Ladbroke Hotel. I can't remember now, but it might be a Novotel now, but it's in Edinburgh.
Oh, wow.
Um, and That sort of sprinted me on, I guess, because by the time I'd finished my apprenticeship, if you want to call it that, it wasn't a formal apprenticeship, but it was an apprenticeship. I was really at the same pace as graduates. So as the graduate intakes were being given management roles, I was at that level. So I hadn't really lost any ground not going to a hotel school or to a university. I'd really had a much richer education, I think, because I was better prepared.
Yes.
And that sort of led me from one position to another to, some pretty prestigious properties. A property I was operations manager in was Craig and Darragh, which is noted really because its proximity to Balmoral, and during the early years of the young princes with Diana, that it was a regular place for them to visit during the holidays. So it was interesting because it got me exposure to aspects of life, I guess, that you don't ordinarily get exposure to, including running events at Balmoral and doing shoots and stuff like that. So hotels was great because it was a real university of life. It really gave me exposure to all walks of life. And it took me to Europe. I sort of peaked my time with Hilton Hotels, running the Brussels Hilton, before going on to run the Dalmoy Hotel in Scotland for Whitbread. So, the industry was a great industry. I enjoyed it, but I did feel that towards the end of my time in hospitality, I wanted a different challenge. I really fell into FM. I think FM as an industry was still very young in the sort of late 1990s, early 2000s.
Yes.
And hospitality didn't seem an obvious step to go to FM.
Yep.
But FM was starting to really embrace the values and the spirit of hospitality in workplace. And so I landed in FM, I guess, just at the cusp of change when hard services was moving into soft services and vice versa. I've got to admit, my first 3 months in FM, I was a little perplexed. I didn't really understand the industry because of the sort of way that FM fits within an organization. And a lot of the early work that I did was with Royal Bank of Scotland, focusing on the sort of integration of two companies, or often in the case of RBS, it was about 4 or 5 companies working under one umbrella. And I guess I was able to not be constrained by the history of how FM had come to be. And I was freer to think about how you simply integrate a workforce, or get a workforce to operate together regardless of who employs who. And that first sort of exposure into FM was a good step, because the bank at the time was really trying to develop a world-class blueprint for service. And I think my experience and the team that I had around me, who were largely hospitality and hotel people, really enabled us to come up with a solution that worked. And a lot of it was really about how we engaged people. It was how we communicated, and it was the approach that we took more than anything. And that very early work that we did was recognized by Cornet Global in the sort of early part of 2005, I think, 2004, 2005. So, we knew, and at that stage I was working for Compass Group, so we knew we were onto something. We knew that the glue, if you like, that was provided from hospitality people working with FM people was the missing ingredient. And I think since then, hoteliers moving to FM has become almost the norm.
Yes, Paul, that's brilliant. So gradually we are coming into the full-on corporate FM cycle here, Paul. So from Compass, how did your career move forward all the way to City so far?
So I spent 3 years with Compass, and we developed a very strong business. But there's an entrepreneurial spirit in hotels. General managers in hotels have to be very agile in moving with market changes, and you have to have the resilience and the foresight to deal with some of the challenges that can hit you. And, I lived through the foot and mouth disease and the impact that had on international markets, and particularly on the hotels I was running at the time, as well as the terrorist attacks. So, dealing with big drops in demand, upwards of 30-40%, and being able to shape the business to deal with that, the big challenges. So coming into FM, I think that experience really helped, because we were trying to reshape delivery. And the thing that was missing for me whilst I was at Compass, although Compass was a great company to work for, was just that freedom to go further than maybe mainstream corporations willing to go.
Yes.
And so, along with a colleague of mine, we decided to set up our own FM company.
Oh, wow.
And we went and sought funding, which we were successful in gaining, and we acquired a business in Northern Ireland, which went on to become Resource Group. And I spent 4 years really trying to build that business, I guess, out into what I imagined the future of FM should be. And unfortunately got caught up in the GLC, or the GFC, sorry, the global finance crash. And I think we're quite unfortunate to land on the wrong side, with a heavily geared company at that time, and with a strangle on funding. It was always going to be difficult to sort of retain control and grow. And in fact, the reality was most companies were starting to just batten down the hatches. And we didn't have that luxury. So I lost control of the company in 2009-10. And that really drew me back into sort of what I call mainstream corporate operations. It was a big challenge. I think one of the most challenging things I've faced is that sense of failure in losing a company. And the sort of objectivity that you try and apply to yourself, because you do differently, however you've played things to have come out with a better outcome. It really built my character, because it really started to help me to I guess, become more self-confident by starting again, in effect. So I joined firstly GDF Suez and then Amey in the UK, and I spent a few years with each of those companies in different roles, but largely operating at a sort of regional level. And it allowed me to sort of go back to the roots of FM, get much closer to the front line of the business, and I guess hear from clients, particularly post the GFC, what the challenges were, and how FM businesses needed to diversify and be, more flexible in their approach post GFC to provide clients with services that were maybe more fit for the future than they have been prior. So, that culminated in an opportunity for me to go to Australia with Sodexo, which is a long story, but in essence, a guy that I'd worked with previously contacted me and asked me if I would join them in Australia for a large tender. And I was at a stage where I wasn't really clear what my direction was. I just felt I needed to get back to a senior leadership role, and one that gave me the flexibility and the freedom, if you like, to engineer new solutions and test markets. And I was fortunate in joining Sodexo at a time when the company itself was going through a transformation. And I guess that allowed me to bring in fresh thinking and fresh ideas into the Australian business first, and then latterly into the global business, which largely centered on, tackling traditional FM problems in a slightly different way and giving clients different opportunities to resolve those problems, almost like a menu of, how to tackle what can be sometimes quite complex internal issues as much as they are, complex operational issues. So during the time with Sodexo, I was fortunate enough to be part of the team that secured the biggest contract that the company had ever been awarded, which was with a large mining company, and was estimated to be valued at over $3 billion. I then mobilized that contract before going on to run the business in Asia, which was definitely one of the most challenging things I've ever done. It was the mobilization of over a dozen services in an area the size of California, and with a diversity of service that was everything from managing aerodromes to managing property portfolios. So I think all of the previous experience I got up to that point really equipped me for the challenge. And I think I've been very lucky, really, to have had the experiences I've had, because that role then took me into a global mining position, and the opportunity to travel all over the world, visiting some of the remote, sites in Chile and in Peru and Colombia, as well as in North America and Australia, and dealing with some, really challenging logistic issues. And I think testing our ability to motivate and engage a workforce remotely. So there's so many sort of I want to describe it as, there's so many sort of ironies about the journey I've been on, because here we are in sort of 2020 in the UK with a global pandemic, and the thing that we're relying on the most is our ability to remote manage, and for the last 3 or 4 years that's what I've been doing. So I think in each step I've taken, I've been very fortunate that the previous step has equipped me for the next one. And so here I am today, leading City in the UK and Europe, with a lens that's very much fixed on the growth of our business, and maturing what we do within the market and expanding our presence in the market, off the back of a very rich and fulfilling 6 years with Sodexo. So each of those steps in each company I've worked for have really guided and provided me with the learning opportunities. And I guess if I've done anything, it's just embrace that. It's embrace the opportunity to learn new things, and to use them to shape whatever the next project has been.
What's unique about City FM, and can you talk a little bit more about the City partnership model, Paul?
Yeah, look, City's a fascinating company. I first came across City when I had my own company, and I was aware of the partnership agreement that City had created at the time with Asda, and most of the market would recognise the City-Asda relationship. What I hadn't quite understood until the middle of last year, when I first got to speak to Willie Hockey, was just how the partnership model had really driven the expansion of the group. And today, City turns over £1 billion. It operates in 7 countries, including North America and Australia, and obviously here in the UK. And that growth has largely been stimulated off the back of, firstly delivering a consistently excellent service to customers, and then our customers really being our advocates and helping us to develop, grow, and expand. But what's very important, I think, and it is fairly unique to City, is that City set out from the beginning to build very strong relationships with its customers, and to build partnership inside out, so that the business really had longevity, which was generated from trust of execution and delivery. There have been many challenges for City over the years, with clients naturally wanting to test in the market whether or not this solution is still relevant and still, delivering value. And at every turn, City's been, it's been demonstrated that City's solution has continued to be up front. I think it does require, though, a very mature customer and a client that is willing to go on a journey, because like all relationships, they go through their peaks and their troughs. And I think that true value gets generated when a third party, in this case City, has a very deep understanding of its customer and a deep understanding of the challenges that its customer faces, because that allows us to be proactive in responding and dealing with challenges. And it's probably never been more relevant than right now. So the uniqueness of City, I think, is driven by Willie, and it's this absolute demand for, our own employee well-being and making sure that our people come first. And then that drives, of course, the customer or service execution, the customer experience. So, it's a very tried and tested methodology. Hotels have been doing it for many years. And so that culture, that environment, it really fits with me, because I get it. And I really do value the input of our people in helping the brand, helping City be the business it is. So I think, a lot of companies can talk about that. City's actually living it and demonstrating it every day, and has done so through this whole pandemic. And the decisions that we've taken have been driven out of what is in the best interests of our people and our customers. So the partnership really is, it's essentially it's a definition of the relationship that we want to have with our customers. It's a set of values that we want to work to, and it's a deep commitment to working collaboratively. And many companies will talk about partnership. What City's been able to achieve over the last 35 years is a replicable partnering model, and that partnering model is operating in multiple countries. So I think, for any customer that's really looking for a genuine, transparent, honest relationship with a third party that is heavily invested in, their values and their direction and supporting their business, City's a great place to start. As a company where we're kind of really tuned in to our customers and to listening and to acting on what we hear. So, look, we're not perfect. Like any company, we have our own issues to tackle day to day. But I think our values and our aspirations and our commitment to partnering our customers, are unquestionable.
So do you have any few words about Willie and his entrepreneurial journey? Because you are being an entrepreneur yourself, so that kinds of aligns with the like mindset as well.
Yeah, look, it was interesting. The very first meeting I had with Willie Hawkey was in itself really enlightening for me, because not only has Willie developed a business which started from very humble beginnings. I think his first investment was £70,000, and it started from refrigeration. But to develop to where he is today, and to at no stage in the journey to have become in any way indebted, it was the first thing that staggered me. Certainly, as somebody who started a business with investment, I couldn't imagine how, unless you started with some wealth, you could really develop a business. So the business's growth's been funded out of cash flow, and it means we have a very strong balance sheet, and it means that we have a very, very agile, very simple way of working. We are still privately held, which I think is great testament to the work that Willie's done. And I think that the dynamics of the company are very much founded on encouraging people to be accountable and take responsibility. So it is a truly entrepreneurial environment that actively encourages creativity, and you can see that throughout the company with what we're doing and some of the technology that we've developed, some of the offers that we've developed, particularly in energy, where we're very strong. With the use of IoT, Citi's one of the few companies, I think, that's really not only embraced IoT, but it's applied it in value-generating environments that are, I think, Willie's legacy is that entrepreneurial spirit. It's that founder's mentality that lives and breathes within Citi, that I think many companies would wish to have. Would love to be able to generate. But it's harder to go back and create something than to build it and sustain it. And it is just part of the DNA of this company.
+25 years career, Paul, or even longer if you add your early part of your career as well. What are your key achievements so far?
One of them is actually getting to where I am now. I set out, I guess, many years ago with a view that at some point I wanted to be running a large company. It's not so important for me to be, let's say, running a PLC, or in fact, I'm probably not a typical PLC CEO. I think my thoughts around leadership are, they're very fluid, in that I think I've tried to sort of learn throughout my career. I'm always hungry for what's happening, for new information, and constantly trying to read and follow new technology and new ideas. And largely it's about how to convert those into an edge in the market. So I guess, certainly being here today and running Citi is definitely one of my key achievements. I think being recognised by the Institute of Hospitality and the Workplace Facilities Management organisations equally, because I'm a fellow of both. Wow. And I think that acknowledgement of my career and the investment that I've made in firstly hospitality and latterly FM, it means a lot to me. But I think within the business, I think that sort of securing and mobilising a contract on the scale that I did in Australia, that the memories of that will live with me forever. And it was a unique one-off experience. So to have done that successfully and to mobilise on time, on budget, with no incidents, no harm to people, and all done within a 3-month timeline, I think I definitely hold that up as something to remember for a long time. And I can't ignore the fact that building resource from the humble beginnings in a pub in Harrogate with a colleague, developing a business case into a business turning over 140 million with 10,000 people. That's right up there. It's interesting because people always ask your achievements and not your failures, but I think for every one of these I could give you a corresponding failure.
Yes.
I'd always imagined resource group would be City, if you know what I mean. I always imagined that's the scale we would get to. So I look back at that as a fantastic experience, a great achievement, and I think all of those things together, I think they really equip me for the job I've got, and I'm excited for the future of City, and excited for the opportunities that I think this team can generate, and for the next big goal that we can achieve.
Wow, that's amazing, Paul. So far we talked more about your career, Paul. Is there top 3 things that not many people know about you?
It's a great question, this one, because I think the first thing is that people who aren't very close to me wouldn't know that I'm by no means a musician, but I enjoy writing music, and I am teaching myself music production at the moment, which I haven't done too much of lately, has to be said, but it's something I enjoy. I enjoy the creation of music. I once did play snooker with Steve Davis when he was world champion.
Oh wow!
In my younger days, I was a very active snooker player, and I played to a reasonable standard. I got invited, or should I say, I was taking part in an event organising. In the sort of early 80s, mid 80s, they used to do exhibitions with the top snooker players. And I happened to be at an event that had been organised in the property that I was running at the time, and I got talking to Steve Davis, and he and I were having a bit of a giggle about some trick shots that he had tried to play in a previous event, and I foolishly said to him that I could play those shots, 10 out of 10. Wow. And he had struggled to deliver them. Anyway, that night he actually invited me up to demonstrate my skills. And thankfully I was able to pull it off. Otherwise I looked pretty foolish. So yeah, that was quite fun. And one of those things I look back on with a bit of a smile. And probably also in true Scouser style, I took my 2 nephews to the 2005 European Cup final. I'm a big Liverpool fan.
Yes.
In Istanbul, and I promised them that they'd meet the team, and I delivered on my promise. We got to Istanbul, and I worked out where the hotel would likely be that they would stay. I managed to, as we'd say in Liverpool, blag my way into the hotel, and the boys, who were, I think they were about 9 and 12 at the time, they got to take videos and pictures and autographs with the squad. So again, I always look back at that one. I think that is such a typical, Scouse thing to do. There was heavy security all around the hotel, and because of my hotel experience, I kind of knew how to wing it to get us over the door. So yeah, 3 things that a bit quirky, but there you go.
When this lockdown suddenly was in place, like in mid-March, Paul, the moment you received the news, what's the first thing you did, Paul, and how everything started to get structured from there?
Well, I had just left Singapore just around the time that China started to advise the world that they had a viral problem that could go pandemic. And it had already started to touch some of the countries that I had been involved with. So I guess I was quite in touch because of the relationships I held with my previous colleagues in Sodexo.
Mm.
So that when I landed on the 1st of March, I was really able to advise the leadership team at that stage of what was coming.
Mm-hmm.
And by the 1st of March, the Singapore office that I had been previously based in was already operating on 50% of its employees. It was already providing a level of social distancing, so I think we had a bit of a heads up. I don't know that it was a huge advantage, but certainly we had an idea of what was coming. But I think, like many businesses in the UK, I don't think we were fully prepared until it physically arrived on our shores, and the first cases emerged. Somehow, I think, being an island, you have this mentality that we are separate from the rest of the world. But of course, with airports being open and operating to all of infected countries, it was inevitable that the UK was going to get hit. I think we'd started the planning. We were pretty prepared to go to home working. I'd say, many people behind the scenes in City worked very hard over a very short period of time to enable that. But I think there was high confidence in our ability to do that from the outset.
Yeah.
And literally in the space of 48 hours, we shifted 400 people to home working with really very little issue. And I think that the work that the IT teams had done and HR teams had done in preparing everybody, was excellent. So it didn't seem as disruptive maybe to City as it perhaps maybe has been to other organizations. We're already a relatively remote operated business. So shutting down our key offices and moving to home working wasn't hugely disruptive. We were already using technology like Teams to communicate. It just meant that got ramped up. And I think the biggest changes started to occur within our customer environments. And, a lot of the work that we did early on was trying to estimate what impact it would have, and how we might have to adapt our operating style in order to meet with the demands that customers would lay on us. And, as you know, City's sort of primary market is retail, although we do operate in healthcare, hotels and other markets. By far the biggest market that we're involved with is retail, and the predominant part of that is food retail. So, you could say fortunate in that we're in a market that is, or has been, pretty actively operating throughout this period. But at the same time, we had the same challenge as every other organization in that we had to furlough some of our people.
Yep.
And it really put to the test the things I mentioned earlier around our commitment to our people. And we took a decision very early that as a leadership team, we would take a pay cut to acknowledge that we're all in this together. So we all went to a 20% pay cut. And then we focused our efforts around how to protect the most vulnerable within our workplace. And so that meant that, we would match, and we met the government's furlough so that our employees were all paid 100% of their pay through the period. So, there's been a burden for the organization as much as there's been a burden for individuals. But I think it's the true strength of our business that we acknowledge the importance and well-being of our people. And I think it's been tested to the max through this period, as I'm sure it has for many companies. So I don't think that City's response to COVID is that different to every other company. I think we've been sort of doing this as we go. And again, it was truly been ahead of the curve in terms of what the government might decide to do at any stage. But we've definitely been scenario planning in the background and trying to think about, even return to work. I think our return to work planning started 2 weeks before the government started to talk about it. So we were already preempting distancing at work and changes to workplace, and adapting the workplace to make it safer, and engaging our people in that process to talk about their anxieties and how they're feeling about returning to work. So we're not in any rush to go back into our offices. We're very much focused today on, managing the circumstances in the best way we can. And I think our plan going forward will be to delay a return to our offices for as long as we can, because we think that provides the best possible protection for our employees.
What have you observed lately, Paul, especially around COVID-19, that reminded you that people are good and kind?
Look, I think the first thing is that we have thousands of employees that get up every morning and put themselves on the line doing their job. And that for me is very humbling. I think, whether your job is, cleaning a retail store or a healthcare operation, or whether it's maintaining, or whatever your functional role is, city employees, like many of companies and organizations in our space, or even employees of those organizations operating throughout this pandemic, have to have the courage to get up and do what they do. And I think, we all owe them a debt of gratitude, and should be saluting people who are effectively putting themselves on the line every day. So, I think for me, it's the challenge every day is how to demonstrate that level of gratitude. And we're doing everything we can to connect with our people to demonstrate how high a value we place upon their effort and their focus in supporting the industries that we're relying on today, in what are very precarious circumstances, where, social distancing and whatever PPE doesn't necessarily remove people from, the risk of harm. So, it's a very humbling thing to have to deal with. I think to sort of have to acknowledge with people and for people that the reality of their day-to-day existence is getting up and essentially stepping into what could be perceived as a dangerous environment. Look, I don't think, if I'm honest, Baachu, that there's a way to thank our people, other than saying it. As I said before, it's very difficult to be, at home, isolating, and trying to lead a business, when everything in your fibre is to get out there, is to get alongside people. And I can't deny it's not been frustrating, because, I would rather be on the front line with our people than here. And I guess like many sort of people in my situation, we also acknowledge the responsible thing to do. So if you have a choice to work from home, you're very fortunate, very fortunate. If you don't have a choice to work from home, then, you have to show incredible courage in going out to work. So, what else can we say other than thank you to those people who do that every day?
So beautiful, Paul. Thank you, Paul. So, Paul, I think, when you are in the normal scenario as a CEO of a business, I'm sure you had multiple meetings, meeting clients, meeting team, meeting different contracts, traveling around. But how did you adapt to the new normal, Paul, from the busy schedule to working from home now? How are you adapting?
Look, it's a really great question, because I think we're so used to just adjusting to the challenges that we face in FM. It's another challenge. I think we've moved to communication through online platforms really seamlessly. I think the sort of disciplines in meetings are better.
Yeah.
I think that there's a newfound respect for the technology. I think that the teams are finding new ways of working all the time, and whether it's a bit of humor around putting different backgrounds up and spiriting yourself off to different places, or whether it's more practical steps in how to use the technology more effectively. I think that the biggest adaptation, if you like, is that we've moved to really using technology in a way that it probably should have been used from the start, but there was probably a reluctance, I think, to let's say remotely connect rather than be face to face. The one thing that I have found difficult, and I'd be surprised if others haven't too, is that there's a spontaneity in business when you're working alongside people day to day.
Yes.
Things happen because you happen to be in the same place at the same time, dealing with a topic or a subject in a more natural environment. And I think there's a little bit lost in that at the moment because everything has to be organized. So where before you might just, pop your head into somebody's office or pass by a department and tackle something, we have to think more, and we have to organize in advance, and we have to think through the topics more carefully and how we want to discuss them. So I think there's a balance here between, a new way of working that can be more remote and certainly can cut down on things like travel and, cut down on the amount of face-to-face meetings. I still think that there's a need to have a connection, a social connection for people to stimulate creativity and to really drive innovation. And it's a perverse thing because on one side you've got a lot of innovation occurring as a result of this. On the other side, I'm saying, well, yeah, but there's also stuff that's getting lost.
Yes.
So I think that's the only thing I would say is really truly impacted is that spontaneity of working closely with people and perhaps tackling things more directly and more speedily than when we're in this sort of isolation.
That's well said, Paul. Paul, at the very top, life at the top of the corporate ladder sometimes tend to be lonely and, a lot to manage, especially at this situation where you'll be looking after your team, you'll be looking after your colleagues, you'll be looking after your clients. But how do you look after yourself, Paul, and how do you keep yourself sane?
Well, I've got to be honest, through this period, it's been challenging because, my personal circumstances have been difficult because we've just relocated and we've been living in temporary accommodation since January.
Wow.
But, mostly it's getting out, it's walking the dogs, it's walking with the family, it's getting that sort of fresh air and just, clearing your mind. And I don't, I suppose I'm not active in sport or any of these things. I enjoy sport, but I don't have a regime, let's say. I tend to find things in my time that take me completely away from thinking about business. So whether that's writing or music or just being with the family, it's that ability to disconnect and focus on other things and then to reconnect. And I think you have to train yourself to do this. I've not always been able to do it. But I think if your work keeps you up at night, you've got to address, what is going wrong. I think you have to be able to relax. And, for me, the things that I do to relax, the things I've mentioned, they do tend to get me in a good space. And I think I've become much more capable of switching off from the business and switching on to the family and vice versa than maybe I was 5-10 years ago. So, I try to sort of think about creative stuff, if that makes sense, to move the dial.
That's amazing, Paul. Yes, you do need to have it. You do need to have it because I was recently speaking to a few colleagues and they said sometimes it's all I expect is someone to ask me, "How are you?" Because you've been so busy trying to help others, trying to fix so many things. Sometimes even asking the basic question is kind of overlooked, Paul. So how are you, Paul? You okay?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we sometimes take these things for granted, don't we? That and I guess I had a lot of learning of this in dealing with mental health challenges in previous businesses. But I think that sort of sense of well-being is, that it's very important to connect and acknowledge the people that you work with and be interested in how they're getting on. And I think it's one of the first steps of awareness in managing mental health, or let's say in identifying that there might be some mental health challenges for an individual you work closely with, is as simple as asking someone how they are. And I think that sort of it in itself is a simple act of kindness, right? That you show interest, genuine interest in how your colleagues are getting on. And it's nice to be asked, regardless of what your job is or what your role is, to have somebody show interest in your well-being is always a very welcome thing.
That's great, Paul. So, Paul, I think you have been a go-getter. You have an entrepreneurial thing. So, what propels just some people to the rank of CEO, Paul, and not others, from your perspective?
Look, I've always been a believer that you have to just want something. If your desire is to be a leader, it doesn't matter whether that's the CEO or the manager. I think if your desire is to lead people, then I think you go that way. And I set out at 21 years of age with a plan to someday run a business. It was that simple. It wasn't to be the CEO. It was to run a business and to have the autonomy to run a business. And I think that what propels people is simply desire. It's the desire to want to do it. I've always been a firm believer in the idea that you can if you think you can. I'm not atypical. I didn't go to university. I didn't go to the best schools, but I think if you're a lifelong learner, and that's what I consider myself, then you can overcome any obstacle. And maybe in some respects, the shortcomings or the gaps that I see in my experience or my knowledge, I'm always trying to overcome, whether that's reading a book on a subject or, investigating a topic online, or, just trying to understand more about a business. I'm always interested. I'm always digging. I'm always looking to try to improve and better myself. So I don't necessarily think of being the CEO as the sort of pinnacle or the, let's say, the sort of key achievement. I think it's what you do in your job or wherever your wherever your direction is. It's what you do and how you do it. It's the legacy that you leave behind. So my achievement will be a legacy. It won't be the job I'm in. And I look back at each role I've had, and I always try to deliver a positive legacy. I absolutely by no means perfect, and I have shortcomings like anyone else. But I think acknowledging and embracing those shortcomings and trying to overcome them constantly is the pursuit of trying to improve yourself, whether they be professional or personal. So I think, ultimately, and I guess the short answer to your question is, well, what propels people is simply the desire to want to do it.
Yes, Paul. I think that's a brilliant advice, Paul. So, Paul, what's one thing that you wish that you had known when you began your career, Paul?
I guess I guess the thing that I would like to have known, and I say this hesitantly because I did once get this advice. I've never been that good at listening to it, but it was definitely that you learn more by listening than talking.
Yes.
And I've not always been blessed with the use of both ears. I've had to learn over the years to be a bit more in the moment. I have a mind that naturally wanders, so somebody can trigger in me a creative thought that can take me from the conversation, and I constantly have to pull myself back. So I've learned to live with that. I don't know if it's a handicap, but I've learned to live with it. And definitely the best advice anyone could have is to listen and learn rather than speak.
Well, let's loosen up a little bit and maybe we'll go for some random questions, Paul. So what was your best subject in school?
It was probably a toss-up between English literature and fine art. I think at one point I fancied myself as a bit of an artist.
Yes.
But I at some stage realized I was just really good at copying things. I actually didn't have that sort of ability to picture something and put it onto a piece of paper. And true artists, I think, have that sort of, that ability to picture something and then paint it, rather than just be reflective of what they see. And literature, I think probably because I'm always been genuinely interested in what we can learn from books, and I'm not as active a reader as I'd like to be. These days I seem to struggle to get past one page before I'm sleeping. I don't know if that's an age thing. But I definitely still reference books a lot, and still enjoy what you can learn outside of the internet. And there's something truly inspiring, I think, about holding a book and taking something that is, it's a very tactile experience as much as it is about, reading and taking something in. I mean, my house is adorned with books, I like the reference ability, I guess, more than I am sort of actively pursuing a new book every month, or trying to pursue the latest idea in a sort of a book form, if that makes sense. So somewhere between the two.
That's brilliant, Paul. Let's go for rapid fire now. So do you have nicknames?
Do you mean me personally?
Yeah.
I think I probably have many nicknames. Probably one that stuck the most was Beano. But those people close to me, they have plenty of nicknames, and some of them I don't want to repeat on air.
That's fine. Beano is amazing. What book or a movie character are you most like?
Oh my word! Have you ever seen The Life of Brian? So there's a character in there who runs the People's Front of Judea. His name is, if I remember right, his name's Ron. I think that would probably be me.
That's right. So why do you think he's similar to you?
Oh, look, I think he's a very serious character, but very comical. And I have a sense of humor, but I tend to be a very serious character. And I think on a personal level, when I'm on my own space, I'm much happier with humor maybe than I am natural in work, even though I think humor is such an important part of relationship building. It's not something that comes natural, and it doesn't come natural to Ron, even though he's very funny.
That's nice. What made you laugh or smile recently?
You know what? I laugh and smile every day at my daughter Georgie, who's 7. She's, I'm constantly amazed that at 7 years old she can give me life lessons, but she does. So she will correct me, and I mean she will correct my English, let alone correct me on my thinking, and she'll also give me guidance, and what I should do or what I shouldn't do, which constantly amuses me because their insight is incredible. I don't know if that's the influence of technology these days, but I can tell you I was 7 years behind her at 7, for sure.
That's so true, Paul. I think my best advisor is my 7-year-old as well. I think he kind of listens to me on all day, and in the night before he sleeps, he just gives me, "Dad, these are the things that you should have maybe done differently."
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Okay, so what's the most courageous thing you have ever done, Paul?
I could probably count a few things here, but I have to think the thing that I was most uncomfortable with was when I was regional director for Whitbread. The CEO of Whitbread was due to give a speech to the first industry event so 400 or 500 people in Edinburgh for the first time in hospitality. And with 24 hours notice, I was asked to step in. I wasn't by any means a public speaker, and I would say I've never been particularly comfortable public speaking, although I do it. And I had to address this audience on innovation. I could have said no, I could have said someone else should do it, but I took the challenge on. And look, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. It's the only time I've ever truly dried up in front of an audience. It wasn't an experience I'd ever like to have again. But I did it, and I got through it. So, I look back and think, would I do it again? I don't know. If I'd probably advise myself not to. But standing up in front of, 400 or 500 of your peers right across the industry and talking on a topic that you're not familiar with and not comfortable with, it took some courage.
Definitely, Paul. That sounds amazing. So, if you could be anywhere else right now, where would it be?
Look, undoubtedly be the Maldives. As long as all my family were with me. I was lucky enough to go to the Maldives last year, and was transfixed by it. It's just, we were on an island for a week. It was truly paradise. No phones, no distractions, just the family. And it was definitely one of the best holiday experiences we've had. So I definitely port myself back to the Maldives just for a week, just to re-energize and come back again.
That's brilliant, Paul. Yeah, fingers crossed. I just want to leave home and go somewhere, regardless wherever.
Yeah.
Are you a morning or a night person, Paul?
I'm definitely a night person. I'm at my creative best between the hours of 11 p.m. and 2 a.m.
Oh, no.
So I try not to do that too often because the mornings are even harder. But definitely, I'm definitely a night person. I think that comes from the hospitality days, to be quite honest.
Yes, that's great, Paul. So, if you could eat only 3 foods for the rest of your life, what would they be?
It would have to be balanced, I think. Strawberries, maybe a fruit, protein, chicken, and maybe carrots. And nothing too exciting, but I should live quite well with a balance.
Wow, Paul, that's amazing. I think that's a brilliant answer, actually. So, who haven't you seen or talked in a long time and hope they are doing okay?
To be honest, one of my last bosses, a guy called Jean-Paul Demecq, who is chairman of Asia and chair of all of the global segments for Sodexo. Just as the pandemic started, we were trying to connect, but he's been incredibly busy. We'll catch up, I'm sure, in the near future. But John Paul was a great supporter of mine in my time with Sodexo, and a thoroughly, genuinely nice individual who I have a lot of respect and time for.
Oh, that's brilliant, Paul. So name one thing that really drives you crazy.
Or bureaucracy. I don't like rules. I like to make rules, but I don't like rules.
That's brilliant.
There's a book, First Break All the Rules. It was one of my favorites for a while.
Yes.
And it's really about pushing the boundaries. And I guess frustration for me is being in any way wrapped up in bureaucracy that stunts creativity.
Mm-hmm. So true, Paul. I can understand. Yeah. So who is your best friend? Tell us about him or her.
So my best friend, I'll leave him nameless. I've known him for over 30 years. We've gone through life together, families together, and he's just an incredible character. Throughout this whole pandemic, he's been volunteering, delivering vital supplies to remote communities across Scotland. He's a social worker. He works in some of the community's toughest environments, and he's got an incredible sense of humor. He keeps me very grounded, and we can not speak for months on end, but whenever we connect, it's as if I saw him yesterday. So yeah, I'm lucky to have a truly great friend.
100% also blessed to have friends like that. So when you're having a bad day, what do you do to make yourself feel better?
I guess, what I suggested earlier about being able to switch off is I try to switch on to more creative things. It could be the family doing something together. But I think it's to switch off from whatever it is that's creating that anxiety, is to step away from it. And sometimes, I definitely learned this in my early career, was I would sweat a problem sometimes for days, and not sleep and throw things around in my mind. And I learned to compartmentalize, to switch off. I can't do anything about that topic or issue today. Switch it off until I have to deal with it, and focus on things that lift me. But I think that's one of life's battles. I don't think that's just about work. I think sometimes you can be having a tough time, and just that's just life. You're just going through a tough period. But certainly for me, it's been that ability to switch these things off, switch a focus onto things that are more positive, and then go back to them. I almost put myself in hospital when I had my own company, largely because I spent most of my time worrying about everything rather than, managing the things that I could influence, which is very much my focus now. If I can't influence it, if I can't change it, then don't worry about it.
That's brilliant, Paul. Beautiful advice there. Paul, what trait do you really like the most about yourself?
Wow, what trait? I think it has to be my personal drive. I've never felt there wasn't something I could conquer. So, if it was, I taught myself guitar, I've taught myself to play some piano. I'm not fluent, but I'm, still learning. I've always felt I could turn my hand to anything. I maybe, as I look back, I'm never going to be truly great at any of these things, but I don't feel intimidated by them, if that makes sense. So I think, drive, that sort of willingness to try anything, to be willing to have a go.
Paul, who are the people who have been the most influential in your life and career?
Well, personally, it's been my grandmother. My grandmother came through the war. My grandfather died relatively young, and she had 8 children, which she brought up on her own. And then, as they had grandchildren, and for a period of time, I lived with her when I was younger, and she was and still is a big inspiration to me. And probably that sort of stoic attitude of mine, that the drive, the willingness to do anything, it comes from her, and the things that she achieved in spite of the challenges that she faced. In the 60s, trying to bring up 8 children, and do a job, and all the things that go with that. It just blows my mind that a single mother could do it. But she was a real inspirational character, and I often think about it. She's sadly long since passed away. But in business, a guy called Jonathan Hawkins, who I worked for in the 80s, he was the first person to really show some belief in me. I think I was very self-conscious then. I wasn't sure if I was cut for business and management and leadership. But in a couple of years, he really transformed my outlook, and he propelled me. I think if I owe anybody a debt of gratitude for helping me to succeed in my career, it was Jonathan. He gave me the belief that I could achieve anything. And I think sometimes people need that. They just need that encouragement to take them to the next level.
So true, Paul. So true. It's amazing. Paul, what is one kind or thoughtful thing someone did to you recently?
My family, are kind every day. I mean, you know, it's like many people, but the people that I'm with and seeing more than anyone else is my family at the moment. And I think this period of this pandemic has probably brought a lot of families much closer. But you know, that probably the greatest act of kindness they give me is putting up with me. They're always looking out for me, and you know, I'm blessed to have, you know, 3 beautiful daughters, and you know, and a very loving relationship. So I think, you know, kindness is an everyday occurrence.
Yes, Paul, that's beautifully said. Paul, what's the best piece of advice you have received, and from whom?
Well, I think I touched on it earlier. It's definitely Jonathan when he told me to listen more, speak less. And I think, you know, the only other piece of advice that has ever really helped me is, you know, came from a speaker, an inspirational speaker that really talked about the power of your own mind and this concept of you can if you think you can. And it's such a simple thing, but you know, when my daughter or in fact anybody around me says I can't do something, it's always my challenge back is, well, if you don't think you can do it, you definitely can't do it.
Yeah.
But if you think you can, you probably can. And I say that simple thing, and particularly for young people who are desperate for acknowledgement and encouragement, that sense that they have the power to control whether they can actually achieve something or not is such an impact. So you know, you can if you think you can, I think is a great statement.
That's a well said thing, Paul. So far, Paul, what's the biggest lesson life has taught you?
I think to be humble. I think I through my early career was, you know, often described as being quite arrogant, and I used to argue the difference between that and confidence, and it's a fine line. But I think acknowledgement of other people and what they bring, and what you can learn from other people, and just being more humble in my own outlook. I think I've learned that, the importance of that, even though inwardly at times I might be thinking, you know, very positively and constructively about an interaction with somebody. Outwardly, I maybe didn't always show that. So I guess I try to be much more overt now in acknowledging that, you know, other people bring a lot to the party, and being more vocal about that than maybe I would have been 20 years ago.
That's great, Paul. Life teaches us lessons all the time, but I'm glad. So, Paul, what's something you're looking forward to in the future?
Playing golf. One of the things I promised myself was that when I came back to the UK, I would definitely play more golf. I've got 2 nephews that are very good golfers. I'm not a very good golfer, but I enjoy the challenge of taking them on. So I think, yeah, as soon as this period is past and we can dust off the clubs and get back together and play some golf, that's what I'll be looking forward to.
Oh, brilliant, Paul. Paul, thanks, Paul. Is there any part of your life or career, Paul, that we haven't touched? We could spend maybe a minute or two on that.
Yeah, look, I think for me, the things that have shaped me in my career, and maybe helped to get me to each new experience, have been adversity. And you know, I think that sometimes people take a view on someone who is in a role and think, well, you know, they've never experienced adversity. But I think adversity is a big part of building your character and building your ability to deal with it in the future. And you know, I've had my fair share of that through you know, my years. But I think that just learning to deal with embrace adversity, that you know, somebody once said to me, you know, what's for you won't pass you by. And I can't say I necessarily fully appreciated the statement at the time, but looking back, the coincidences of my experiences and where it's taken me, coincidences or design, I couldn't tell you, but it does seem very, very odd to me that I've ended up where I wanted to be, and the journey that I've had to take to get there has taken many twists. And, so I've had lots of ups and downs, but I still look back with great fondness on the whole experience. So I don't know if there's any other areas. I mean, I think we could talk all day. If the tables were turned, I'm sure your story would be compelling. So, we've covered a lot of ground.
Oh, thank you, Paul. I think it's really been a privilege to have you with us at Baachu Talk, Paul. Thank you so much for your time today. Wish you and colleagues at City and your family, friends, clients, everybody, all the good health and happiness. Stay kind, stay healthy, and keep inspiring, Paul. Thank you so much for today.
And you too, Baachu, and thanks very much for inviting me to talk to you today.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Please do visit baachu.com/Baachu Talk podcast to this specific episode link to everything that was mentioned in this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and share Baachu Talk podcast with your loved ones. We will see you at the next episode with another special guest. Until then, it's Bhaskar Sundaram from Baachu signing off.